Good evening. It's great to be here at Swain County in the high school. We had a great afternoon session, and we appreciate you coming out tonight. This means a lot to me personally because 6 years ago we began Narrative 4. Not we, but I was a small part of it. One of the first places that we talked about was Swain County, this high school. So thanks to Dawn Gilchrist, I know some of you have her as a teacher, and Ben Cutler later, Annette Clapsaddle, and Dora May. They've made this possible tonight, so they deserve, they do deserve a break. Yeah, they've done the heavy lifting, believe me. But I thought just a way to start was I'd tell a little story about my life. When I was 5 years old, I had a copy of The Cat in the Hat my parents had given me. And my mother probably read it to me 100 times, but one day she was busy, so she asked my grandfather to read it, or I asked him, actually. And so he put me in his lap, and he started reading The Cat in the Hat to me. And it was going in a very different direction than the one my mother had read. And as I said this afternoon, by the time we got toward the end, it was like the cat was going to do serious jail time. So that was, but I asked him to read it again a week later, and it was a different story. And every time he told it to me, it was different. And what I didn't know then, but pretty quickly found out in a couple of years, was that my grandfather couldn't read or write. But he gave me a great gift, I think, the power of story. And actually, I can remember I made up some stories with Dick and Jane, and my Dick had a Marlin 22 rifle, and Jane was Sarah Jane, and they ate cat head biscuits. So a little bit different, but I took those characters, and I didn't let Dick have that sissy beach ball. I got rid of that too. But 6 years ago in Colorado, I had that sense of the power of story one more time, because we had gathered, Lisa had brought us together, and a group of writers told stories. Colin was one of these, and it was an amazing experience. We were reminded of the power of story, and that was just what we hope to do today and tonight, is to kind of bring that experience to you, and we've had some of that already. But anyway, thank you for coming. And I'm going to start with reading from Plant Life by my friend and colleague, Pam Duncan. And I'm so proud to do this. "Wipe your feet," I said when he came in, and he did. Then took off his hat and coat and hung them on the back of the door. He sat down at the table and started sweeping circles on it with his hands, little ones at first, then bigger and bigger, till he was stretching clear across the table to reach. There wasn't a crumb on the table. He just did it out of habit. I watched him a minute, then turned back to the stove to finish supper. He'd killed a rabbit that morning. I'd made a big pot of stew with the meat and had a pan of cornbread nearly done. I stirred the pot and said, "Wasn't any good, was it?" "Nope," he said, kept on rubbing the table. "I told you," I said, "we were already mortgaged. Why would the bank give us any more money?" I reckon he hoped they'd take pity on a family with 8 children. It was so quiet in the kitchen, except for the bubbling pot and sound of his dry palms on the table. "Lord, will you quit that?" I said. "You're driving me crazy." He quit, then said, "I sold 10 acres to Willard Jenkins." I got real still then. 10 acres. He sold 10 acres of his daddy's precious land. I would have thought he'd sell one of the young'uns first. "How much?" I said. $500. 500. That couldn't get us through. Pay for food and fuel and seed in the spring. We'd have to be careful though. Couldn't nobody get sick, at least not sick enough to need a doctor. "That'll have to do," I said. That's all I said, with all I knew of his family and how much the land meant, and his promise to his daddy to keep it in the family. I always thought it was unfair of his daddy to expect so much. Dill was only one man, and he had to work a job in the mill just to pay taxes on the place. But no matter how hard he had to work, he always swore he'd never sell. Losing that 10 acres broke his heart. He still had 120 left, but that was the beginning of the end of it. He seemed to know already times would stay hard, and every time he'd have to sell more and more, until finally all that was left was the 8 acres Pansy and Dan live on now. In a few minutes, he started rubbing the table again. That old oak table his daddy made for his mama. The same table they laid her out on when she died. The same table his daddy was laid out when he died in his sleep the year me and Dill got married. I believe Dill was trying to say sorry with his hands. Sorry to his daddy for letting him down.
Hi, I'm Pam Duncan, and I swear Ron Rash could read the back of a cereal box and make it sound good. I wrote that, and I think it sounded pretty good coming out of his mouth. I'm proud to be up here reading, this may be our only poem, reading one of Ron's poems. I'll tell you, though, I'm intimidated because I've heard Ron read this poem many times, and I cannot do it justice like he can, but I'll do the best I can. This is called 3 a.m. and the stars were out. When the phone rings way too late for good news, just another farmer wanting me to lose half a night's sleep and drive some backcountry washout for miles, fix what he's botched. On such nights, I'm like an old drowsy god, tired of answering prayers. So let it ring a while, hope they might hang up, though of course they don't. Don't, because they know the younger vets shuck off these dark expeditions to me, thinking it's my job, not theirs. Because I've done it so long, I'm used to such nights. Because old as I am, I'll still do what they refuse to. And soon I'm driving out of Marshall, headed north, most often toward Shelton Laurel, toward some barn where a calf that's been bad bred to save stud fees is trying to be born. Or a cow laid out in a barn stall, dying of milk fever, easily cured if a man hadn't wagered against his own dismal luck, waited too late, hoping to save my fee for a salt lick, roll of barbed wire. And it's not all his own fault. Pour too long turns the smartest man stupid, makes him see nothing beyond a short-term gain, which is why I know more likely than not I'll be arriving too late. What's to be done, best done with rifle or shotgun. So make driving the good part. Turn off my radio, let the dark close around until I know a kind of loneliness that doesn't feel sad as I pass the homes of folks I don't know, may never know, but wonder what they are dreaming, what life they wake to. Thinking such things, or sometimes just watching for what stays unseen, except on country roads after midnight. The copperheads soaking up what heat the blacktop still holds. Foxes and bobcats. One time in the 50s, a panther. Yellow eyes bright as truck beams. Black-tipped tail swishing before leaping away through the trees, back into its extinction. All this thinking and watching, keeping my mind off what waits up the road. Worst of all, the calves I have to pull one piece at a time, birth and death. Though sometimes it all works out. I turn a calf's head, and then, like a safe's combination, the womb unlocks, calf slides free. Or this night, when stubborn life got back on its feet, round eyes clear and hungry, my IV stuck in its neck, and I take my time packing up, ask for a second cup of coffee, so I can linger a while in the barn mouth, watching stars awake in their wide pasture. Thank you.
My name's Robert Gipe. I live in Harlan, Kentucky. It's a privilege to be here. I started in this business at Apple Shop in 1989, and one of the people that helped me the most was a woman named Angeline DeBoard, one of the best storytellers I ever met. She was from Bryson City, so I've always known that there was good action here. It's great to be here. It's my pleasure to read something by David Joy, who lives down the road. Jackson County, is it? He lives in Jackson County. He's been a very good friend to me. I've met his girlfriend. I've met his barber. I've met he's been very friendly and very nice on the social media, and so it's my pleasure to read this out of his book, From the Line That Held Us. That last day of October, Dwayne Brewer drove through town at sunset, blue lights screaming past like meteors. Steam bellowed from the smokestacks of the paper mill, white rolling into dull yellow sky. And he watched that place disappear in his rear view like everything else before. Passing Harold's Grocery headed into Dillsboro, he saw hundreds of birds filling the sky. A cloud of buzzards shifting on thermals, their wings tilting back and forth to steady their wide-set whirling. He leaned low against the steering wheel to watch them as he crossed the bridge over Scotts Creek, and he wondered if they would follow him, if they would always follow. And his heart knew the answer, that their work lies all where, and their wings tire not. Through the windshield, empty flea markets and dimly lit filling stations blurred by in his periphery. He rode past fields separated from the highway only by thin tree lines, yellowed fields of oak grass and sedge, where old barns crumbled in on themselves like gray ash. The highway was empty once he passed Bryson City, the dark shadows of mountains closing in, the night now fully upon him. And Fontana Lake opened over a bridge that crossed the Little Tennessee, where it slowed through the Narrows into stilled, slack water. And a few miles farther, the highway split one way into the gorge, the other toward Almond, and he followed the northwest fork along Finger Lake and over the mouth of the Nantahala. He wasn't sure what to do with the car. His instinct said, siphon the gas and douse the Grand Prix with fuel, plug the tank with the gasoline-soaked rag, and burn Carol's car to the ground. In such darkness, the fire would be seen for miles, drawing the law like moths. Tall flames whipping at the sky, black smoke only serving to veil the starlight. He thought then of sinking the car in the water, the stilled surface gurgling a story till it stilled again. There were so many things buried here, entire towns, like Judson, flooded and forgotten, that he could not bear the thought of adding a single ghost. In the end, he simply pulled into a ditch near Fontana Village and rolled the window up on a white rag to make it seem as if he'd broken down and traveled on.
It's funny to me that the sentence that tripped him up right there was his allusion to the final line in Suttree when he says something along Cormac McCarthy's Suttree when he says their work lies all where and the hounds tire not. But it's funny to me that I'd slip Robert Gipe up on a McCarthy line. I'm gonna read from Robert Gipe's Trampoline. I'll try not to screw it up. Decent accelerated into a sort of straightaway. I couldn't believe there weren't any cops, but we never saw the first one, and before I knew it, we were almost to Pennington Gap. Decent got into her music and spent most of the trip singing in a voice that was good-hearted and strong, but not easy to listen to, which was just as well, because I needed to think, and when I did, I realized there were more things I should have said to June in our talk beside the river. Things like this. Blue Bear wasn't just about winning a fight. Everything I could see from Mamaw's porch, every place I had run through on a four-wheeler, every bird song and spring flower, every ferny frond that come up beside a yellow muddy trail, all that kept me alive, sure, as if it was air I was breathing. The trees and the roll of the earth held me up like the ridge holds the cloud from passing so it can pour down rain. The vines and the rabbits and the squirrels and the orange lizards out on the rocks after a storm, all those things I'd forget when people dragged me down. I needed them close and always where I could get to them quick when Albert was crazy on some new dope, when Mama was out of her head, when Mamaw pulled back in her groundhog hole of nothing for me, when Hubert made me want to blow his head clean off, when there was only mountains could talk sense to me. Winter, summer, spring, and fall. Didn't matter, I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was like if my best true friend were from Africa or Russia or something, and they didn't speak English, but they had a look in their eye or a sound in their voice, made me calm down, made me look up, look out, instead of just letting my eyes go burning blank with panic and mad at the world. I couldn't let that get torn down. When this reason for fighting came into my mind that night riding home with decent Ferguson, the faces of my cousin Denny and his daddy rose up before me. Those coal miners who had been so good to me, who had loved me through my tree-hugging ways, needed mountains and woods more than any of us. They loved it here and they had to tear it up to stay. The full hardness of their lot came down on me that winter night, and I knew maybe not them, but other coal mining people would be mad at me, would hate me. But after that night, I was never mad at them. Not the ones who lived here with me, not the ones taking their own sorrow and joy from what was left of these trees, these rocks, these rustling waters. That's God.
Hey. My name's Beverly. Gotta get my cheat sheets down here. I'm gonna do a couple songs that I wrote, stories from my life. I grew up in California, and hope I can read this. The most fun that we had in our life back then was going up in the summers. We'd go up to the Sierras, and we were just little kids. And what I remember was my parents pulling us out of bed at night and putting us in the station wagon. We'd always pretend to be asleep, but we never were. But we were really excited to go up to Pinecrest, which there was a place called Strawberry Lake, and a little boat that we'd always go on called the Strawberry Queen. So this is called the Strawberry Queen. When school is finally done and vacation's just begun, we will pack the station wagon in the night. Get the kids out of the sack, lay 'em down flat on their back. Hope they'll just go back to sleep without a fight. Take the bridge across the bay, watch as night turns into day, and we'll wonder if it isn't just a dream. It's the best day of the year when the time is drawing near that we'll be riding on the Strawberry Queen. Well, we've done it every year. It's a habit, it appears. But there's no place here on earth we'd rather be. When we get to the campground, we will pitch our tents around underneath the ponderosa pine trees. In the day we'll swim and play, the kids will make pine cone bouquets, then we'll head down to the beach to make the scene. But when Sunday comes around again, we will stand in line and then we'll take a ride on the Strawberry Queen. She's the pride of the town, fit for a king. From stem to stern and in between, looks like a diamond, smells like gasoline. She's a gem on the water, the Strawberry Queen. Well, you've never really been here till your kids have learned to swim here, learned to sail, ride a boat, had a first kiss, watched a Disney movie outdoors on a seat made out of cardboard, learned, built a fire, used an axe and ice pick, had your bed sheets full of sand, lived on corned beef, hash and spam, wondered if your fingernails would ever clean. But you wouldn't trade it in, but just might do it all again to take a ride on the Strawberry Queen. She's the pride of the town, fit for a king. From stem to stern and in between, looks like a diamond, smells like gasoline. She's a gem on the water, the Strawberry Queen. She's a gem on the water, the Strawberry Queen. Thank you. Well, I live in North Carolina now, but I lived in Georgia for a few years. This has got 3 pages. I had this wonderful house, a little farmhouse, little white farmhouse, turn of the century. Big oak trees all around, and a train ran through the front yard, which I think is why I could afford to buy it. And the realtor, I asked the realtor how often the train came by, and he said, oh, hardly ever, but it came through a couple times at night and several times during the day. But we really loved that train, and my driveway went over the tracks, so the house sat by itself. And because the driveway went over the tracks, meant that the train had to blow its horn when it came by. So, all right, it's got a lot of words. The little shack by the railroad track. In my dreams I'm going back to a place, to my little cottage home, underneath the line of oak trees that the train tracks run along. It could happen any hour that the train would rumble through, and that old house would shake like the windows would break, the horn a howling whoo. Now when I hear that whistle blow, I wanna grab my head and go back to that little shack by the railroad track and those happy days of long ago. I lay low, lay, ooh, Thank you.
I'm going to read from Wiley Cash's most recent novel, The Last Ballad. The first time Ella had ever laid eyes on Charlie Shope was back in February when he'd catcalled her from the back of a Model T flatbed as it rumbled past on the Kings Mountain Highway. She and Violet had been crossing the field that separated Stumptown from Bessemer City on their way to work the night shift. The weather was cold and damp. The sky was white. The man's legs were covered over with a blanket. His feet dangled off the back of the truck. A battered suitcase sat beside him. An old guitar rested on his lap. Ella and Violet watched him get smaller and smaller as the distance between them and the truck grew. He tipped his hat and blew a kiss, and then he was gone. They walked in silence for a moment. "What in the hell was that?" Ella had finally asked. "That was a white man in a truck," Violet said. "I know that," Ella said. "Who's he think he's whistling at?" "You, white girl," Violet forced a laugh. "You think he was hollering at me? Shoot." Violet had stopped walking and stared at Ella. Then she looked behind her in the direction of Stumptown. A few roofs were visible on the far side of the hill. She looked toward the forest on the right, the leafless sky wispy in the distance. Then she turned her eyes to the road where the truck had just passed. The air was cold. It smelled of wood smoke. Their noses ran. "What in the world else was he whistling at?" Violet asked. She took a handkerchief from her pocket, blew into it. "I don't care," Ella said. "I just mind my own business." Violet smiled, put the handkerchief back in her pocket. "Come on, girl," she said. We're gonna be late. Neither one of us can afford that. This world ain't going to pay you in whistles." The second time Ella saw Charlie Shope was the very next night, in the spinning room at the mill. He sidled up to where she stood on the line, took off his hat, and held it over his heart. He was small, not much taller than her. "I seen you yesterday," he said, his voice barely reaching over the noise of the machines, "crossing the field with that colored girl." Ella acted like she didn't hear him. She kept her eyes on the strands as they coiled around the bobbins. He leaned toward her, cupped a hand around his mouth. "I seen you yesterday," he hollered. Ella looked up as if she just realized someone had spoken to her. "Yeah," she said, "you saw me? Good for you." "Yeah," he said, "you seen me?" Ella looked at his sweaty brown hair, his ruddy face, the gap between his front teeth when he smiled. "Where do you work?" she asked. He stood up as straight as he could. "Down in the carding room for now." She shook her head, allowed her face to register a smile. The Doffer boy came through, and she and Charlie both stepped back as he lifted the full bobbins from the spinners and replaced them with empty spindles. Ella moved quickly behind him, fixing the strands to the bobbins. Charlie followed her. "I'm just in the carding room for now," he said. "What's for now?" she asked. "The carding room," he said. "I'll be weaving here soon and make most of my money with the guitar anyway." "Okay," she said. He stopped following behind her, asked, "Did you see me out there on the road yesterday or not?" "If I seen you, I don't remember it," she said. "And if I remember you, I done forgot you already." "That's okay," he said. "We got all the time in the world to get acquainted. I'm going to marry you."
My name's Wiley Cash, and I live over in Asheville. That's where I drove in from before tonight. I would have been with y'all today, but I was teaching another workshop over there. I'm going to read a prose poem called Lost and Found on Highway 25 South by Jeremy Jones, who just read some of my work. Jeremy's author of a great book called Bear Wallow. He's one of the few people I know who got to grow up in a place that is interesting and then go do interesting things and then come back to that place. It's a pretty wonderful set of circumstances if you can have it happen to you. So this is about Highway 25 South, heading out of Hendersonville or heading off I-26, heading down into Greenville, South Carolina. I used to drive this route. I worked for a tuxedo shop in the Asheville Mall, and we used to drive the dirty tuxedos down to the warehouse in Greenville, South Carolina, where they would be laundered, and you'd drive up a new order. And I drove this old van that all the seats had been taken out of it, and you could see in the rearview mirror the tuxedos just swinging like like black ghosts behind you when you descended, and you'll get a sense of that descent in this bit of writing. You've already forgotten why you've come, why you left the mountains to be swallowed whole by kudzu, to become a wanderer in a desert of hand-scrawled signs, each one a temptation or a prayer. Watermelons, stop. Tomatoes, here. There is no one place, only places scattered along the fallen highway, as if each produce stand and clapboard church meant to climb the mountain but never made it. Farther down awaits the promise of respite, traveler's rest, having been raised up for people to stop in the evenness before the never-ending climb. But here, between the rest and the mountaintop, springs up an abundance of gaudy and God. Every neon tinderbox selling fireworks, followed by a church offering, a backlit sign. Are you ready? Who wheeled these block letters and yellowed screens to the edge, only to then disappear along this now straight and empty and ever-growing stretch of nowhere? Look up, the next church demands, but you can't. You're still contemplating the majesty of the purple spires and striped green castle of Charlie's fireworks. Jesus, the sign assures, is coming. And now you know. Not far beyond the pasture of ceramic animals, each one stilled as if life solidified in its blood, you realize he has come already. No one is here. Everyone has been raptured away into clouds, and everything remade. The world a deep, hungry green, and soon, you are sure, the Dixie Outpost and Foothills Baptist Church and even Charlie's fireworks will be wound tight in weeds and vines, leaving only words peeking out as if flashes of flesh beneath the tattered shirt. You will fall only farther down because there was no way up from here, no exit, no turnoff, and those coming behind you will only find traces of what was. Look, stop, Jesus, fire.
I'm Silas House. I'm really honored to be reading from one of my favorite novels, Let the Great World Spin by Colin McCann. Before I do, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us up here when I thank him for making us part of this and inviting us to come connect with all of y'all, especially the students that we got to spend time with today. It's a really special thing that Narrative 4 is doing, and a really important thing, so I'm honored to be a part of it. This is from Let the Great World Spin. A charge entered the air all around the watchers, and now that the day had been made official by sirens, there was a chatter among them, their balance set on edge, their calm fading, and they turned to one another and began to speculate. Would he jump? Would he fall? Would he tiptoe along the ledge? Did he work there? Was he solitary? Was he a decoy? Was he wearing a uniform? Did anyone have binoculars? Perfect strangers touched one another on the elbows. Swear words went between them, and whispers that there'd been a botched robbery, that he was some sort of cat burglar, that he'd taken hostages. He was an Arab, a Jew, a Cypriot, an IRA man, that he was really just a publicity stunt, a corporate scam, drink more Coca-Cola, eat more Fritos, smoke more parliaments, spray more Lysol, love more Jesus, or that he was a protester, and he was going to hang a slogan. He would slide it from the tower ledge, leave it there to flutter in the breeze like some great piece of sky laundry. Nixon out now. Remember Nam, Sam, independence for Indochina. And then someone said that maybe he was a hang glider or a parachutist, and all the others laughed, but they were perplexed by the cable at his feet. And the whole August morning was blown wide open, and the watchers stood rooted. There was no going anywhere for a while. The voices rose to a crescendo, all sorts of accents, a babble, until a small red-headed man in the Home Title Guarantee Company on Church Street lifted the sash of his office window, placed his elbows on the sill, took a deep breath, leaned out, and roared into the distance, "Do it, asshole!" There was a dip before the laughter, a second before it sank in among the watchers, a reverence for the man's irreverence, because secretly that's what so many of them felt. Do it, for Christ's sake, do it. And then a torrent of chatter was released, a call and response, and it seemed to ripple all the way from the windowsill down to the sidewalk. They really wanted to witness a great fall, see someone arc downward all that distance, to disappear from the sight line, flail, smash to the ground, and give the Wednesday and electricity a meaning that all they needed to become a family was 1 millisecond of slippage, while the others, those who wanted him to stay, to hold the line, to become the brink but no farther, felt viable now. With disgust for the shouters, they wanted the man to save himself, step backward into the arms of the cops instead of the sky. They were jazzed now, pumped. The lines were drawn. Do it, asshole. Don't do it. Way above, there was a movement. In the dark clothing, his every twitch counted. He folded over, a half thing, bent, as if examining his shoes, like a pencil mark, most of which had been erased. The posture of a diver. And then they saw it. The watchers stood silent. Even those who had wanted the man to jump felt the air knocked out. They drew back and moaned. A body was sailing out into the middle of the air. He was gone. He'd done it. Some blessed themselves, closed their eyes, waited for the thump. The body twirled and caught and flipped, thrown around by the wind. Then a shout sounded across the watchers, a woman's voice. "God, oh God, it's a shirt, it's just a shirt." It was falling, 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 yes, a sweatshirt, fluttering, and then their eyes left the clothing in midair, because high above the man had unfolded upward from his crouch, and a new hush settled over the cops above and the watchers below, a rush of emotion rippling among them, because the man had arisen from the bend holding a long, thin bar in his hands, jiggling it, testing its weight, bobbing it up and down in the air, a long black bar, so pliable that the ends swayed, and his gaze was fixed on the far tower, still wrapped in scaffolding, like a wounded thing waiting to be reached. And now the cable at his feet made sense to everyone. And whatever else it was there would be no chance they could pull away now. No morning coffee, no conference room cigarette, no nonchalant carpet shuffle. The waiting had been made magical, and they watched as he lifted one dark, slippered foot like a man about to enter warm gray water. The watchers below pulled in their breath all at once. The air felt suddenly shared. The man above was a word they seemed to know, though they had not heard it before. Out he went.
I want that accent. Electricity. He was gone. Is that right? Wow. So nice. Do it, asshole. You're going to read my next book, will you? Like, do it for audiobooks. You might wonder why it was that we chose to sort of inhabit one another's work. Well, that's the fulcrum of our organisation, Narrative 4. I have a whole load of new friends and some old friends here on stage tonight. I am deeply indebted
to them for coming along this evening. We had a full house of students this afternoon. I wish we had a full house of people here tonight, but it's really important that you guys are here. And I think what we need to do is acknowledge the young people who have been part of Narrative 4's last few days, the young people from Swain County and from Fieldston in the Bronx, who are the ones who are charged with taking this new empathy, this new idea of stepping into one another's shoes, owning one another's stories, and turning it into action. They're all down here. They deserve a big round of applause. You should be very proud of them. Anyone from here, from Swain County, if you've seen the way these young people have been presenting themselves, the way they've opened up their rib cages to new experience, to new ideas, and sort of gone out into the world when they came up to New York City, and the way they have been so incredibly hospitable to all of us down here. I think the whole county should be incredibly proud of what they have done, but even more excited about what they will do. And Narrative 4 is part of all that. We're interested in, I say, expanding the lungs of the world so that we step into one another's shoes, so that one day one of your children from this school will exchange stories with a kid from South Africa, or a young girl from France, or a kid from the south side of Chicago, or a person from just across the street in Swain County. The main point being that we need to understand the others in order to understand ourselves, and to make this place more nuanced, more complicated, and to hold contradictory ideas in the palms of our hands. And don't let the world say that, and our political parties seem to want us to say that they want us to remain siloed. And I don't think that we are siloed in that way. We're much more complicated than the world expects us to be. And I think that's the essence of stories and storytelling. And to have all these writers on stage here tonight, for me, gives me great hope and joy. And to have all these young people here sharing stories with one another is extraordinary. And now I get to the essence of what Narrative 4 is about. My name is Silas House, and this is from my new novel, coming out in June, Southernmost. Justin used to think the trees were God. But today, right here, he thinks the ocean might be God. All that power and weakness spread out for us to see. The ocean can do so much when it wants to, and sometimes it can do nothing but go in and out, waves and smoothness. The ocean is a mystery, and so is God. They are both so big we cannot see all of them at the same time, but we can catch pieces of them here and there. Justin believes God is big like the ocean, even bigger, but lots of people don't. They think he's small enough to fit in a church house or on an offering plate or an ancient book. He's not. And his mind is even bigger than him. People look at the ocean and they usually see only blueness. But there are so many other colors. Right now, Justin can see 10 different shades of blue and lots of greens. There are lines of brown and the white lips of the waves. When the light hits the water in a certain way, there will even be more color: red, orange, peach, purple. At night there will be gray, and the farther he could swim out into the ocean, he could find the water darker and darker until it was black on a cloudy night. Justin thinks God's eyes are that color, every color. This is the kind of talk that would horrify his mother, but he believes God is in everything and everybody, pieces of him. He doesn't just mean the spirit, he means the actual chunks of God. He thinks he's not only in the ocean, but also in shady and the sand and the trees and every person on this beach, every person in the world. Today, right this minute, Justin can see nothing but ocean, and that is everything. And Justin can feel the everything beneath his hand where he's resting his palm on Shady's chest, and Shady's heart thrums in a steady rhythm like the waves on the beach. He can feel the everything under himself in the gritty sand. He can smell it in the seaweedy smell smoothing over his face. He can hear it in the laughter of the teenagers down the beach, and in the crying of that baby, and the metal sound of the airplane sliding over them all, and the water coming in and out and in and out. The ocean is God, but so are we all. But this isn't the kind of thing he can say out loud to anyone. He knows it's the kind of talk he can say to himself in his own mind when he's sitting on a beach 1,000 miles from home, not knowing what will come next. We're going to have some more music here in a minute, but I wanted to try and engage the authors. And myself and Ron here have been friends now ever since that sort of infamous night that we got together in Colorado, and we sort of broke open the atom in relation to the idea of storytelling. Ron, I think that's what we did, and we. I don't know. We touched the essence of something that meant a whole lot to a lot of people, and now we're sort of spreading it out around the world. We're in South Africa, we're in Ireland, we're in Mexico, we're in Swain County, of course. Yes, and all over the United States. And there is one person who I want to invite up here on stage because I think the young people should be represented too, and I want her to get a little word in. Your very own Reagan Beck is going to come up and sit in one of these chairs and engage in this conversation. She's amazing, by the way, and she's been with Narrative 4 for a long time, so Reagan's going to contribute to the conversation as well. But I'm going to hand it over to Ron for just a second.
Well, we've had a great evening so far, and I think we've got some people now that haven't been with Narrative 4 who will be, and maybe just kind of let you talk about what today's been like, particularly since it's the first time you've been involved.
Oh, man. I guess the thing that comes to my mind is the workshop we did. Silas and I did a workshop on identity. I see some of your faces down there. And I was just so impressed by what the students shared and how different everybody's story was, but how honest you were talking about who you are, what your identity is. And even though I know it's scary sharing some of the things you guys shared, but it was very moving, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to hear other people's stories, hear your stories, and get to know you just a little bit. In a way that I wouldn't just walking past you in the hall. And but thank you all for sharing that. And I hope you all know that you are writers, even if you don't believe it right now. I hope you'll keep writing. Yes, pat her on the back.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering, Reagan, how was your workshop experience? And can you explain your own sort of involvement with Narrative 4 as you went along?
Sure. So I started out with Narrative 4 in the summer of 2016. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the summit in Ireland, and ever since then it's just sort of snowballed. And with the help of Mr. Cutler and Ms. Clapsaddle and Miss May, we've gotten a lot of student involvement with Narrative 4 over the past couple years, and we're just doing everything we can to ensure that it doesn't leave with me. And as far as the workshop went today, we had an incredible time with Mr. David Joy and Ron Rash. Yeah, we had a pretty great group discussion just about what it means to have roots and to have a voice that's connected to your home. And I really related to a lot of the things that they were saying as far as Appalachian culture goes, because I think for the most part, as we go off to college and careers, we sort of let that part of ourselves die out of a sense of pressure from society because it's considered to be ignorant or impolite almost. But yeah, so that really resonated with me, just being able to harness that identity and be proud of it.
Thank you. David, I told you got to be proud. You got to be proud of all of them. David, I went to your barber too, by the way. How was that workshop for you today? How did that go? I mean, these young people are, well, in my experience, in my workshop, they're amazing.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we keep missing when we're talking about story is what I think makes a lot of great stories work, and that is just an unrelenting honesty and fearlessness, and it's the willingness to allow yourself to be vulnerable, and that's something that every one of those kids did. And that's a very brave thing to do. There are very few people in this world who are willing to stand on a stage and allow themselves to be vulnerable. When we were talking about this, one of the students from New York had said when they first did the story exchange, she said, I was very skeptical. She said, I didn't believe that it would work. And she said, and that first time, it didn't work. And somebody kind of interrupted her and they got to talking. And what she admitted was that in that first session, everybody had their guard up. Nobody was willing to allow themselves to be vulnerable. And then she said about the third time, that it was one of those experiences where it changes your life. That's art. That's the power of story. I think all of that boils down to the vulnerability. That's where empathy is rooted, is kind of in that. And I think for me, it was very special to see a group of people this young who were more fearless than a whole lot of the adults I encounter every single day of my life.
Thank you, David. Wiley, you came later on this evening and you didn't see some of the sparks that were happening. I am so honored that you're part of this group and everything. But I was interested in how did it feel for you then to sort of inhabit someone else's? And have you ever done that before? Like read someone else's work in front of them?
I'll read my own stuff and I'll impersonate Jeremy at home and just read various things. Just channel Jeremy in my bathroom, reading in the mirror. First of all, it's an honor to be here. While these various authors were reading, I just thought, how did I get here? This is ridiculous. Why am I on this stage? Because I'm so in love with all of their work and the work they do on the page and off. But, I started as a reader. I think most of us who are writers, many of us here we start off as readers. And I was a reader who was really fortunate to be raised in a home where literacy was encouraged. So we were read to a lot when I was a kid. And so I read out loud a lot when I was a kid. And so a lot of my earliest notions of written storytelling, I grew up kind of in an oral storytelling culture, but my earliest notions of written storytelling were reading the written word out loud, because that's kind of how I learned to hear stories, and how I learned to kind of write stories was by reading the work of other people. But I haven't heard anyone read my work out loud. That was kind of an exciting thing, and kind of to hear yourself outside of yourself. Because, as writers, we're so often stuck at the desk by ourselves, or we're doing something off by ourselves. So to hear your words in someone else's voice gives it this corporeal existence outside of you, and you want your work to exist outside of you. So to have someone like Jeremy read my work, it feels like it does.
Thank you so much. Robert, one of the elephants in the room, maybe, and maybe you can correct me on this, is the idea that people have outside of here about the South and about what's going on intellectually, culturally, and so on. And maybe people in Ireland don't have the right sort of view of how vibrant it happens to be here. And am I right or wrong about that? And how can we change the perceived structures that are in place? And do we do it with storytelling? And what more can we do in order to dismantle some of the stereotypes?
Last week, I was in Richmond at Apollo Pizza, and I was reading with Ronnie Lundy, who just published a cookbook about Appalachian cooking. And she was, in the piece she read, she was interviewing this man that grew up in the tradition and was an excellent canner and preserver. He and his wife made pretty much the best jams and jellies around, and some of the restaurants in Asheville were buying them. And Ronnie was talking about him, and she was talking about, she also got off talking about how Appalachian cooks through the 40s and 50s and the post-war era, they started getting away from their traditions, and she called it aspirational cooking, getting away from who they were and trying to be somebody else from some other place that was supposed to be better. And so at the end of this piece she read, she asked this guy who was a brilliant, he was like a jelly artist, right? I mean, he made all this awesome preserves, and she asked him, she said, "Do you think you're an aspirational cook?" Said, "Do you feel like, you're becoming more like other people in the United States with your cooking? Are you aspirational?" And she said earlier that he watched the mountain out his porch window like other people watch television. And so she said he looked out over the mountains and he just said, "I just hate it for them." And I feel like that there are a lot of people in our world that are like that, and we need to remember that. I just hate it for them if they think that we are missing something, and I think these cats from Fieldston probably can speak to it. It's like, we have a big time. We're having a good time. We're making pickle milkshakes. I heard about pickle milkshakes over at the neighbors today. But I think it's important for people in this area just to remember what a treasure what we have is, not just for each other, but that other people treasure it too. And it's like we shouldn't feel sorry for other people. That's just not good Christian behavior, right? It's like we shouldn't pity them, and just like we don't want them to pity us. So. And can I say a minute about, we had a good workshop today, and I'd like to thank Miss May, who's the art teacher here, because she reached out to me, and she was just so full of ideas, and she introduced me to Judah Cullah, who was a Cherokee kind of god, and I guess... And we were talking, and he stole his wife from the Cherokee and took her back to the other world, yon side of the Juttaculla Rock. And his brother came to rescue her, and he smote him with lightning. And it turned out then they started telling me that it was a lot like that story that I used to call the Persephone story, but apparently it's Persephone. And And similar, very similar to Persephone, and so we got to talking about this Judiculla, who is a giant, and me and David are very interested in giants, and I said, well, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Is he a force for good and evil? And who was it? Was it Callie? Callie hit me to the nature of gods, which I didn't know as much about God, being a god, when I was in high school as these guys did. They're like, well, gods aren't good or evil. Gods just cause stuff to happen. Gods are just masters of chaos. And I'm like, well, that don't sound too good to me. I wanted to make a villain out of them. They're like, no, that's just gods just set stuff loose. But then we all talked about the giants in our life. And then we made linoleum cuts of our various giants and gods and had a big time.
All right. And I love the point you make about these cats from Fieldston. These cats from Fieldston are forever changed, and you know, this whole thing is sort of nuanced. Now, Jeremy, you went away in order to come home, right? Is that is that a way to put it? You went to South America, Central America, in order to come home in a way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was just thinking, I hope I'm not the person that goes after Robert, and then you said my name, but. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot today about how going to other places allows you to empathize with other people, but really what we kept coming back to is that leaving, you know, I think we have this idea that you have to stay in a place to maintain your identity, but in a lot of ways, leaving helps you understand your identity in a more complex and nuanced way, like Colin was saying, so that for me, leaving the place where my family's been for, you know, a couple of centuries helped me understand a lot more about that place than staying would have, I think. I saw things in it that I couldn't have seen if I had still been living here. And I think it also helps you understand things about yourself. We talked about that a lot today. The cats from Fieldston were talking about things they have learned about themselves just by being here, and the ways that they're seen and how that affects the way they act. So I would encourage you, like if you're feeling nervous about going somewhere and you think you'll never come back, I'll stand as witness that you do come back if you want to come back, and you'll learn more about your home sometimes by leaving it, by going away, and seeing what else is out there.
Thank you. Silas, you bring an incredible nuance to this place for readers sort of all over the world. Can you talk about your relationship with the area and how it makes you feel to see these kids coming together from different parts of this country and potentially down through the years, different parts of the world coming here?
Well, what I try to do in my writing is just show the place as a complex place. I think that most of the media vilifies this place, but I think it's also a disservice to romanticize it. So to me, the big thing is to complexify it. And what was the second part? I'm sorry.
So we have all the we have these young people coming from different parts of the world here, and then potentially down through the years we're going to have people coming from all over the world here.
Well, I was just thinking earlier that I think that's the most important work that can be done right now when it seems like the country's so divided, and this a whole mentality of me first, and any kind of organization that's about building empathy is the kind of organization I want to be a part of. So that's why I wanted to come and be here. And like Pam was saying, our workshop, we certainly saw that on display. I mean, we were talking earlier that we were really proud of ourselves because we managed to hold it together in workshop and not break down crying in front of the class, because there was so much, like David was saying, so much vulnerability on display, and that vulnerability, what it really illuminated was all the strength in the room, because they made themselves so vulnerable, and that just takes so much strength, and they were all, so full of that. And I just hear people talk all the time about, millennials or whatever you all are, Generation Y. I
was going to say, millennials have been going on forever. Like, how long is this generation?
Well, young people, that whole idea, people say that with disdain. And I'm just sort of, when I get to sit down with a few young people in high school in this age, it just always makes me feel so much better in dark, troubling times.
Yeah, and talking of, before we go to Ron, and then we're going to finish off with songs from somebody's child. I want to ask Reagan about that, about your generation, and it seems to me that there is a new energy coming about, and you yourself are on your way to college now, sometime soon. And how does all this? Do you feel there's an energy, a new movement, a new idea coming about, and are you guys going to be able to save it for us?
It's kind of a big question. But I definitely do feel like as a generation we're very energized. Because it seems like things have been sort of stagnant over the years when it comes to social change and activism. And I think I speak for most of us when I say that we're tired of it. And some of the people who have come before us have started to give us a voice, I think. Some of the other people in our generation even. And we're starting to feel like we have this platform to incite change. And I don't think that's something that every generation has had. That platform is something that's very important to build a foundation for change. And I feel like that we're developing that right now. And that's what Narrative 4 is all about, a generation of empathetic leaders. And that's what we're becoming.
Thank you so much. Ron, we've been friends now since that sort of like time that we met in Colorado. So, it's been very important to me to see how we've grown, and we've done tens of thousands of story exchanges all around the world. But from that sort of fundamental evening, do you see the same sort of optimism that Reagan sees? And can you close out the evening for us and introduce then somebody's child?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If I'm honest, and I will be, 6 years ago when we first started this and the idea of this story exchange, which we did in Colorado, I was very cynical about it. It just seemed like one of those kind of feel-good things that should have disappeared with the 60s. But once we made that change, it was amazing. That day, I'll never forget that day. I can remember so much about that pasture, that house, and the story that I was told and I told back. And it really transformed me. And I think I'm so glad that we can bring, and I am optimistic. I think, but we have to do it. I think you said, Colin, one time, changing the world one story at a time. And I think that's really what we're attempting to do. And I did want to say one other thing, because I think the perception of us in this region very often from outside is that we're, the stereotypes you already know. I don't even need to tell them to you. And I hesitate a little bit about telling that story about my grandfather, because, it kind of in some ways might feed into that idea that, it's kind of funny, and I know probably every writer in here that's from the South knows this. They think we're savants, that some kind of like lightning hit us and suddenly we can be eloquent, and that's how we write. But we read too. My parents met in a cotton mill, but as adults they went back to school, went to college. My mother in her late 30s, my father in his mid to late 20s, and became teachers. And books and reading were always important for us. And I remember somehow there was a list of 100 great books, great novels, and somehow it ended up in our house. And I was 14 years old, and I saw one that said Crime and Punishment. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty good. And I started reading it, and obviously at 14 I couldn't really understand Dostoevsky on the level I can today, but I can remember a scene about 60 or 70 pages in where Raskolnikov kills the pawnbroker. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't so much that I'd entered a book, but a book entered me. And that feeling, I think, has been recreated at Narrative 4 again and again. And I think each time it happens, we become more than what we were.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's Ron Rash. Thank you all for coming along this evening. We have Somebody's Child who are going to play for us now and finish out the evening. Woo.
Thank you. So how are we doing this evening? Well, I hope it's been a fantastic evening to be a part of. We're just so honored that we were invited. So thank you, Mr. Cutler, Ms. Clapsaddle, Ms. May, and everyone else that has stuck around to hear us. We appreciate it.
All right. We're actually going to do just one song together, and then Coley's going to do a song solo for you guys. This first song that we're going to do is actually about a little girl that I've known now for about 2 years, and she's got all kinds of good stories. She's from Georgia, and she's lived here in Bryson City for a while, for a couple of years, but she has so many good stories, and she's about 10 years old now, but when I wrote this song, she was 9. And I used to come home every day and tell Coley all these stories that she would tell me. And like you guys are talking about, she was so honest, and I just wanted to capture her honesty in some of these stories that she told me in a song. So that's where this song came from.
Can we hear that out there? This song's called The War.
Georgia, raised in Carolina, long I took a siege near the Tennessee line. Poor southern girl with long blonde hair, crystal blue eyes and 1,000-yard stare. Long, 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 long. And I knew gold prodigy with a story to tell. She never heard of heaven but to find your hell. Sweet Georgia peach with a bitter black core. Mama's little angel couldn't ask for more. Long, 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 long. Papa's in prison for an unspeakable crime. Wouldn't know his face, he never gave her the time. She's like her mama, don't give a damn, Lord, she's gonna get even any way that she can. A southern tragedy with an aching to roam. The girl knows nothing but a squalid home. A southern tragedy with an aching to roam. The child's new shoes are like her mama's men, so walking out the door before she ever broke them in. Long, 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 long. with no dreams to borrow. You can cross her once, but don't dare cross her twice. If you do, you're bound to pay the price. Long, 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 long. Her papa's in prison for an unspeakable crime. I wouldn't know his face, he never gave her the time. She's like her mama, don't give a damn, Lord. She's gonna get even any way that she can.
Cherry be a bowl full of shit. Run your mouth and you're gonna get hit. Dirty little finger screaming at your neighbor. If she doesn't get you now, when's she gonna get you later? La 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 la.
Thank you, guys. That's only like, that's probably maybe the third time we've ever performed that song, so thank you. Glad we could share it with you guys tonight. All right, Coley's gonna do one now that I asked him to do, because this is a story that was hard for him to share. It took a couple of years after he wrote this. It was a couple of years before he could perform this song, so we'll see how he does with it, but it's a special song, so I hope you enjoy it.
All right, so yeah, we're somebody's child from Bryson City. Ashley and I grew up here. We went to school here at Swain High. We graduated from Swain High. We now teach at the Swain County Public School System. So again, I just want to thank you guys so much for having us out tonight. It's so nice to be able to share our artwork with everybody, and you guys actually listen. So like Ashley said, this is a song about my grandfather, who was a huge influence on my life, and he was born and raised in Appalachia, and it was so nice to hear all you guys like praise Appalachia, because again, it's one of those things, no matter where you're from, it's sometimes one of those things you want to run away from, but in the end you always sort of find yourself coming back to it, and I think this is sort of my way of coming back to it. This song is called GT, which was my grandfather's name.
Will always be home to me. But sometimes the man in the boy just longs to be free. So she signed that dotted line and she put me on the boat, thinking, son, will I see you again? This was all she wrote. Well, my boat went down just outside of Japan. Yeah, we took heavy fire and we got blood on our heads. Some made it out while others still sleep in the sea. And in the dead of silence, I still hear them scream. Well, make it out of here? Can I live with myself and keep my conscience clear? They say this war, it will solve everything. But who fights for freedom when you're already free? And in that great darkness, the light, she found me. I met a sweet girl in the hills of Cherokee. She was sweet as honeysuckle and soft as grass on bare feet. And when I stare at her, she stares back at me. And times got bad and they sent me back to war. I often think, what the hell am I fighting for? And tell my children that daddy sure loves them. And when the mess is over, we can be whole again. Well, if I ever make it out of here, can I live with myself and keep my conscience clear? They say this war, it will solve everything. But who fights for freedom when you're already free? The memories of you still flood me from time to time. From old 60s records to salt on a watermelon rind. Cigarettes burn while medals hang on the wall. A face without emotion from all the things you saw. So let's grab our poles and head to the creek one last time. And tell Granny Adams we'll bring some fish to fry. You sit around the table and talk about nothing all night long. You don't know what you're having till it's gone. I still can't believe that you're gone. No, you don't know what you're having till it's gone.
Thank you so much.
Woo!
Come on out and take a bow. All of you guys. Beverly, too, please. Thank you to somebody's child, to Beverly Smith, to all of these incredible writers. I want to say thank you to the teachers at Fieldston. I want to say thank you to the teachers and the administration of Swain County. I want to say a little special thank you to my goddaughter Annabella for being here. And a really big thank you for the people who dreamed this up. Lee Keelock, Kelsey Roberts, and most of all, Lisa Consiglio. Thank you so much. The authors will be signing books if you want some books signed later this evening, and thank you all for coming along.